What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
The Mazda 3 changed generations in 2013. The transition from Zoom Zoom to Kodo was accompanied by technical innovations, a departure from the former Ford platform and almost complete change of the engine range in favor of units of the Skyactiv family. ADAS commercial cars appeared by the end of the same 2013, and the price list at the start of sales was quite attractive. Sedan was available from 650,000, hatchback from 700, and the top versions were available in 1 million rubles. It was not too cheap, but it was well within the market limits against the background of competitors. However, since 2014, against the background of rising exchange rates, the price tags have crept upwards. As a result, by the 2016 restyling, the starting price tag had already risen to 1.25 million rubles, and well-equipped cars cost more than 1.5 million. Mazda 3 was already really among the best sellers in our country, and against the background of rising prices, the purebred Japanese sold all the more unimportant. In the best years, dealers shipped 1,000 or 2 cars to buyers, and after restyling, sales were counted in hundreds. However, there is a secondary market for the model. At the moment of writing the material, there were almost 300 pre-restyling and more than 50 restyling cars for sale on Avito. Let's find out whether Treshka has not lost something important at restyling, whether it is difficult to choose it, and whether it is expensive to keep. The age of cars in 3 to 9 years still allows to choose them according to the principle not to be seriously beaten most of the body. Problems are usually related to the restoration after an accident and not always qualitative. The body itself is still resisting age and corrosion. It cannot be called perfectly protected. Thin paintwork and varnish, which can withstand only a couple 3 polishings, does not like stones and scratches, but chips rust slowly. Correspondingly, corrosion spots that are visible externally should alert you. Small defects can be found in typical places on the edges of the arches, the front part of the hood and the frame of the windshield, and also on the joints of bumpers with wings. The sills are covered from below with plastic shields, which is generally a good thing as it protects them from sandblasts and stones. However, moisture can also get trapped under the plastic, causing rust, for example, in the holes for the clips. So once every 3 to 5 years, you should definitely remove the covers to inspect and rinse the hidden cavities. The same applies to the arches. There are pockets under the lockers that accumulate dirt and moisture. Accordingly, you can also find corrosion centers in the cavities of the arches. Of course, there will be them on the bottom, especially in the rear part, as well as on subframes and in their attachment points. However, it does not come to serious problems yet, so the thickness gauge and a hoist should help to find a decent copy. The search for a non-beaten car is somewhat complicated by the fact that body parts for the Treshka are offered in assortment, and non-original ones allow you to save well. For example, the front bumper after the accident cannot be soldered. If the original costs 50 to 70,000, the analogs from 12 to 30. Another 9 to 12,000 will have to give for a massive false radiator grille, which in general is also not so expensive. The front fender can be bought for 5 to 10,000 instead of 30,000, and for the hood there are many substitutes for 20 to 70,000. At the price of the original in 80 to 100,000. Branded windshield, of course, is expensive, 60 to 80,000, but here there are cheap options for 10 to 12,000, but average cannot be found. Even optics is available in non-original version. For example, you can buy a halogen headlight for 15 to 30,000 at the price of the original in 60 to 80,000. Bi-xenon optics is much more expensive, but you can buy analogs for 50,000, which is relatively inexpensive. In addition, something can be found on dismantling, and even local. So, the restoration of Mazda 3 after an accident for resale seems to be quite profitable for the seller and unprofitable for the buyer of such a car. The platform was updated without changing the fundamental design decisions. In suspensions, in the front there is McPherson, and at the rear multi-lever. In addition, the suspension has done without aluminum, the levers here are steel. Repairability, however, is not ideal. For example, front ball bearings are pressed into the levers and hub bearings both in front and behind are changed together with the hub unit. However, non-original parts manufacturers have solved almost all issues. The front L-shaped lever can be bought in an assembly from $6,000 instead of $20,000 to $25,000, and it is possible to buy and repair. Ball bearing for repressing, here there are variants from 800 rubles to 5,000. The hub assembly both in front and behind will cost about $15,000 to $20,000 for the original and from $5,000 to $20,000 for substitutes. Stabilizer struts cost the usual money, $2,000 to $3,000 for the original and from 500 rubles for analogs. The range of non-original front shock absorbers is small, but there are both cheap variants for $4,000 to $5,000 and typical solutions. Like KYB for $8,000 and for the original asked $15,000 to $20,000. But rear shock absorbers will almost certainly have to be bought original for $12,000 to $15,000 as there are practically no analogs here. The rear multilever is not too ruinous in repair. So, the upper transverse lever can be bought for $5,000 to $7,000 instead of $7,000 to $10,000 and the lower transverse rod for $4,000 to $6,000 even in the original version. Lower transverse and longitudinal rear levers cost $12,000 to $15,000 each, not prohibitively expensive, but if for the upper there are separately original silent blocks, then for these only brakes in the 3 are not as bright as the appearance here are applied. The usual single piston mechanisms with a floating bracket both in front and behind. Front discs on cars with motors less than 2 liters have a diameter of 280 mm and on gasoline and diesel cars with motors from 2 liters. Discs on 295 mm are applied. At the back in any case there will be unventilated discs on 265 mm. The price of consumables here is also moderate. Original front discs will cost in $10,000 for a piece and analogs begin with 3. Rear discs in a firm box can be even more expensive than front ones, but non-original is available from $2,000 and for $4,000 to $5,000 it is possible to buy a qualitative variant and in $2,000 to $3,000 will cost decent pads. Steering control on the third generation of Mazda 3 is finally deprived of hydraulics and received an electric amplifier located on a steering column. During a test drive it is worth to estimate its work on the subject of uniformity of effort and absence of jerks and jolts on a steering wheel. EPS itself is supplied as a separate unit, but only in the original version with a 6-figure price tag, so in case of its malfunction, the road lies either in repair or on disassembly. But the mechanical rack is predictably cheap, even the original can be bought for $45,000 to $50,000 and the restored node is offered in a range of prices from $12,000 to $25,000. Having parted with Ford, Mazda did not receive robotized gearboxes and many today will say that it is for the best. After all, in the third generation, that 3 is equipped with classic automatic transmissions. With the old 1.6-liter motor is combined with a 4-speed automatic, and Skyactiv units received a new 6-speed in a pair. 4-speed gearbox FN4A EL inherited the third generation from the second and the 1 from the first. All this hints that the box is not young and quite reliable, and it is really so. Under the condition of oil change once in 50 to 60,000 kilometers and quiet driving, the automatic is able to pass 300,000 kilometers before overhaul, and the installation of an additional oil cooling radiator strengthens this probability. However, sharp starts and rare oil changes reduce it greatly. Torque converter lock works actively, and dirty oil can finish the automatic machine by 150 to 200,000 kilometers. However, even from the point of view of repair there is good news. It is relatively inexpensive, and to save money, it is possible to reassemble the box without dismantling. However, the newer automatic FW6A, which worked with Skyactiv motors, is also quite good. The design here is more complicated and working temperatures can be higher, so the cleanliness of the standard heat exchanger should be closely monitored, as well as the frequency of service. Dealers change oil for the first time in the best case by 100,000 kilometers, but if the owner has plans to drive the car for a long time, the interval should be halved. And if to enjoy controllability of 3, not demanding from it traffic light records, the box too can pass 250 to 300,000 kilometers. One line mention manual gearbox, which was available only for the base 1.6-liter engine. It has a typically good resource and with mileage up to 250,000 kilometers is unlikely to bring any difficulties, so it can also be recommended for purchase. The list of motors in Mazda 3 included both gasoline and diesel variants, but we got only 3 gasoline ones. And the basic 1.6-litre was an obvious curtsy in the direction of conservative buyers. It is an old ZM of MZR family, which also moved here from the last generation of the model. There's a cast iron block, reliable chain timing, a single inlet phase shifter, distributed injection, and no hydro compensators. If you keep the radiators, EGR and intake clean, do not save on oil and do not forget to adjust valve clearances, the motor is able to pass the cherished 250 to 300,000 kilometers. Oil loss may appear earlier, by 200,000 kilometers, but usually the reason for this is the lodged rings. Worse, if the oil addiction is connected with destruction of the catalytic converter, it is unlikely, but possible, so when buying a car with a mileage of more than 100,000, it is worth to ask about its condition and look into the cylinders with an endoscope. The new Skyactiv series motors with very high compression ratios have taken a lot of work from engineers in development, but don't require as much from owners. The base 1.5-litre P5 produces 120 horsepower, while the older 2-litre PEVPS, as on the Mazda CX-5, the engine was defortified from 165 to 150 horsepower to reduce transportation tax. Up to a mileage of 150,000 kilometers could unpleasantly surprise owners. Only oil consumption, it manifested itself already in the first years, but remains small and usually does not indicate problems. However, in general, it is worth considering that maintenance and repair here will be more expensive than for the old engine. For example, direct injection is the price of the fuel injector in 40 to 50,000 rubles and injectors at 15,000, and the replacement of the catalytic converter is more expensive because of the complex exhaust manifold, made in a sporty manner, according to the Scheme 421. But in general, motors cannot be feared. So, the Mazda 3 of the third generation offered in Russia power units for every taste. Those who want to get from a spectacular car a spectacular dynamics, as well as good equipment, can choose a restyled 3 with a motor Skyactiv from the first owner and with a mileage of up to 100,000 kilometers, approximately like this. Well, and conservatives who buy a car with a sight on long operation without sports ambitions can look for a restyled copy with a motor 1, 6 and 4-speed. Automatic, minimum mileage and transparent history. If Autoteca will confirm the honesty of the mileage and the absence of accidents, and the inspection will not reveal hidden problems, then you can drive such a 3 for another 3 to 5 years, or even more. And all these years to look back at it when going home. In conclusion, the Mazda 3 3BM offers a compelling blend of classic design and modern features, making it a worthy consideration for anyone looking to invest around 1.5 million. While it may not have the latest technology found in newer models, its reliability, driving experience, and overall value can make it a smart choice. Ultimately, whether you prioritize the old or the new, the Mazda 3 3BM stands out as a solid option that proves not everything from the past is outdated. Thank you for watching, and we hope this helps you make an informed decision.